Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. My name is Chris Province, and it is only me today because we're doing something a little bit different. This is going to be released as a bonus episode, and this is my friend Dillon Hargraves, who, man, he's just an amazing person and friend, and you guys have heard about him on a previous episode when we talked about strengths. But as part of his project with Sauntermore, he actually is interviewing me about values and big P purpose and personal strategic plans. So anyway, I'm going to kind of hand it to him and say, Dillon, I am here for you and here for all the wonderful people you get to engage with at Sauntermore every day.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate you being here today. And, just as a way to kind of call back why we're here, is to say that for those of you who don't know, Chris and I did a leadership program together back in 2020, I believe. It seems like it wasn't that long ago,
man.
But it has been. It's been quite some time. And we really connected, and we fell into good rapport, started meeting pretty regularly. And, I'll never forget, and I've talked about this a lot when I talk about Sauntermore, a conversation we had where you asked me, I had made this commitment to be a stay-at-home dad for a season. To just spend as much time as I could with my daughter. And I was moving out of that season. And I said, I need to help gaining direction and where I'm going to go next. And I don't remember the exact words you used, but you asked me something along the lines of, if you could do anything at all, for no money, what would you continue to? What would you keep doing? And you can clarify if you have that question, stuck away in a pocket somewhere. Which my point is to say is that really helped solidify my commitment to going forward with creating this peer discussion group for leaders with disabilities. Because at the time I had been volunteering for a disability ministry, and I am now on contract with them, supporting that ministry and the founders in Sauntermore.
Right.
And I said something along the lines that day of saying I would just keep working with the Julian way.
Yeah.
But it really clarified my vision for this next season in my life. And one of the things I value so much about our relationship is the sense of purpose that you bring to the work that you do, to our relationship, to the connection that we have, and the gratitude that you have for the time that we have together. And so today, what I wanted to talk to you about, because one of the things that we are discussing in the Sauntermore group is this idea of purpose. And today, we're actually talking about values. So I'm curious, how do you define purpose? I know that there's big P purpose and little p purpose, so we can start there. What's the difference between those two things?
Well, when I think about big P purpose, is the way that I read it, it's the greatest good that I can possibly achieve. So in that, it's going to be a bit overarching. It's really going to cover maybe a more global belief about possible impact, right? And so that's my big P purpose. And my big P purpose is, I even have like multiple versions of it, right? So I have the one that I use, which is long form, and I have the one that I share with everyone. So my long form, big P purpose is this idea that with a loving heart, with peace in my soul, as I can kind of carry with me a spirit of grace, I want to care for everyone that inspires me, and I want to support them in the development and achievement of their identified purpose. And I think by doing that, and along the way, we cultivate a collective intention and gratitude. So that's my long form purpose. Okay, now, what's that look like when I share it with other people? Well, I connect with people in meaningful ways to advance their purpose, intention, and gratitude. But there's all these other things that are behind it. There's the story. Like if I say with a loving heart, with a peaceful soul, with a spirit of grace, it's the manner in which I want to go about achieving it. And in that, you start to see values show up, right? Because I could probably go about connecting with people and advancing purpose, intention, and gratitude a lot of different ways. But when I start to think about how am I going about it, how do I feel as I'm doing that work, those values really start to emerge. And so that's the big P purpose. Little P purpose, like what's my purpose as a father? You know, what's my purpose as a husband? What's my purpose as a grandson, a friend, a student, a practitioner, an educator? We have all of these roles. And I think within our roles, we have those little P's, you know, and, you know, kind of understanding that my success is not tied to any particular role. It's not tied to a title. It's not the car I drive. It's not the money in the bank account. It's none of that. But I feel like my success is really tied to my ability to build meaningful relationships and create a fulfilling existence for other people, for me as being a part of just someone else's story, that I'm not isolated. You know, if we think about where does performance typically trend downward? It's when we're isolated. When we're in community, when we're engaged, when we have the connection, we have the relationships, when we have the support, life gets really fulfilling. And I'm not as disciplined. Like, I don't know that I'm not disciplined enough to control all of my thoughts and all of my emotions 100% of the time if I'm completely isolated. Too much head game there.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that success is tied to your big P purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is this connection to people, helping people find gratitude and meaning, and that the little P purpose, it shows up in all these various roles that we all play, and these hats that we wear, and almost everybody in contemporary life has multiple roles that they play, right?
Right.
Which I like that distinction, right? Because how you show up through your little P purpose, how you show up with your big P purpose through your little P purpose, can look different from one role to the next. But I also hear in your story something that I think is really meaningful to me and to the members of Sauntermore is that the value that we have when we feel connected increases our performance.
Right. Absolutely. And so and here's the thing that increases performance, as best I can tell, for companies, for individuals, for leaders, whatever, communities, churches, right? I just shared with you my purpose. I did not communicate to you how intensely I believe it. Okay. I make decisions every day that communicate to the people around me how intensely I believe it. It's the decisions I make every day that will. I mean, talk is cheap. It's words on a wall, right? It's just words on paper until I action it. How committed to it am I? Will I give my time, resource? Will I give of my intellect? Will I give of my emotion? Will I give financially? How committed, like how intensely do I believe? And I think that's the unlock. We will only attract people that believe what we believe. That's who we will become connected to. How intensely I believe in my purpose will determine how intense the relationships are that I get to enjoy. So if we're really looking at how do I create rich fulfillment in my own life, it is finding, getting explicit about what we believe and believing that wholeheartedly and intensely. And that's why I ask you that first question. If you could do anything you wanted, what would you do? And you'd be like, I would just do more of this. Well, guess what? There's 1,000 ways to make money. Right. And I am a person that believes, like, given enough thought with the right people in the room, people can do what they're best at. People can do and create a fulfilling career and have that blessing to be able to believe intensely and enjoy the fulfillment that goes with that.
Yeah, and I love that you introduce the idea of intensity to the conversation because, when we talked about Maslow's, we call it the hierarchy of needs. In the last meeting, we introduced it in a slightly different framework, and one of the things that I noticed about the visual that we observed is that as you moved uh, up the hierarchy towards self-actualization, the intensity of that need gets higher.
Mm-hmm.
Not only do we have to, it requires a base level of all the other needs being covered, but once you get all of those needs covered, when you get higher up that, closer to that level of self-actualization and even transcendence, that the intensity gets so much higher. And then whenever we're talking about purpose today and the nature of the work that we're all doing,
Mm-hmm.
is to say is that this is an intense level of connection, because the work that the relationships that we're building are in a sense part of our spiritual journey.
Right. And that's where, as we learn, as we mature, as we grow, resistance becomes greater, especially for strivers. It calls for a breakthrough. And I think as we move from kind of one need into the other, right, when we have the bases covered and we're really looking for self-actualization, like self-determination, maybe, right? Like, how do I want to grab my autonomy and never release it. I want to self-determine. I want to determine the way that I want to determine the work that I'm fortunate enough to do. I want to determine who I do it with. I want to determine the way I go about it. Like, I want autonomy, right? How can I arrive there, right? How can I get to that self-actualized, self-determining level if I don't do the work to understand what I believe? But the minute I look at what I believe and say, yeah, if I believe that intensely, that'll take me exactly where I want to go. Like, that's the unlock. Because, and there's so many things about systems in the world that squeeze us into mediocrity. And what I would say is, like, everyone in this room has a gift. Like, we've been gifted a couple things. We got the gift of today, right? Which is the greatest gift. It brings with it a lot of positive potential. And we have the gifts that we were given, right? The gifts that we were born with. Maybe it's somebody's ability to connect. Maybe it's somebody's ability to offer a different perspective. Maybe it's somebody's problem-solving skills. I don't know. But everyone has these ridiculous gifts that, if we look at today as a gift, then the only way we honor today is by applying our gifts to achieve something for someone else. To me, that's where we start trying to model that spirituality. Like, we always come back to this idea that we try to avoid. But, like, leadership involves morality. And where do we draw that sense of morality from? There has to be a source code for that. There has to be something we anchor to. And, that's just something as I've gone on, it's just something I accept. Right? I cannot separate leadership from morality, and I can't separate morality from spirituality. Now, with that, I say, whatever a person chooses to believe that empowers them and gives them that sense of fulfillment, that's what I support. So how we pray, who we pray, like it's really about the moral fibers that are derived from that spirituality that show up in how that person leads. And can they create followers? Can they be part of a community? Can they create a community? Those are all really powerful ideas, but are sourced from the same place, knowing what we believe. If I know what I believe, then I can create a movement. If I don't know what I believe, I have to follow and do a lot of trial and error and run into a lot of things and encounter quite a bit of suffering.
Yeah, I love that. And, it reminds me of the other topic we covered in the last session of the layers of belonging, belonging to self, belonging to now, and belonging to we, right? And um, I, 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 I want to get into values, but I want to kind of sneak in, maybe through the side door, this idea that how do we know if we're showing up at a discount if we've never r- had a good conceptual understanding of what it is to show up uh, at full price?
Right. Yeah. And one, in the language there, I want to pick something apart on that. When we talked to Chris King on the podcast not too long ago, and he said the past only exists in our minds. Right. He was quoting previous psychologist said, the past doesn't exist. Well, where does it exist? Right. It only exists in our mind. So what does it matter? Right. And so this is where I want to kind of model spirituality and leadership coming together and like how we behave. Like I think Brad can help keep me honest, but I think it's Luke chapter 1 where it says, I'll be right there, Lord, but I've got to go do this other thing first. And the Lord's response was, the man that has his hands on the plow, but eyes facing backwards, is not intended for the kingdom of God. And as I work through that, I'm like, okay, so what's my prayer around this? And I just said, Lord, don't let me dwell on my failings of the past. Let me reflect on those as learning, but never be beholden to them. Help me keep my eyes forward, staying in the moment as I do the work required of me in this season, in this now. And it's just that practice of taking something like that and like, how far out do I want to carry it? And so as we engage with those things, what does that spirituality bleed into my leadership? It's like, guess what? Yesterday doesn't matter. Today matters. My intentionality today matters. How do I do the work today to show up at a premium? 100% me. Because Dillon, like you are 100% outfitted to do exactly what you're doing. There's not another person on earth outfitted to do what you're doing the way that you're outfitted to do it. And I believe that. And I believe that every person in Sauntermore is built exactly to achieve what they desire to achieve. But it's that unlock. The world wants to pull us into kind of the fat part of the bell curve. Like ordinary kind of gets us through the days, but ordinary doesn't plow the field. Right? Eyes forward, hands on the plow. Let's go to work and focus on what's right in front of us. and commit to our values only for today. Like, use those values as the plow only today. And someday in the future, live the benefit of having many days well lived. Like, that's the idea. But looking back, looking too far ahead, like, not helpful. Those things don't exist. So what's holding us back?
My question is to say, and this manifests itself in my relationships when I talk about it as this idea of having a clear compass or a true North Star. But what I really mean by that, I think, is to say, how do I discern what my core values are versus maybe the core values of the culture I was raised in, or the community that I live in, or the media, or the economy? How do I know what my true values are, and how do I know when my compass is clear? Does that make
Sure.
sense?
Right. How do you get the noise out of the way?
Right.
Well, you have to create space. I mean, rule number 1, create space. Leaders create space. Create space to do the work required in the moment. Right? If you create the space and you wrestle with that concept long enough, you'll figure it out. Right? Like, I'm not one to tell you. All I can tell you is, like, create the space and wrestle it. And through that rumble, you will arrive at the right spot. It probably requires something to record your thoughts with, right? So you can go back and see, like, okay, if this is true, what do I think about that? If this is true, does that make that not true? How much am I giving appropriate weight to appropriate influences? And is this idea of a particular value, is it already something that I exhibit, or is it something that's aspirational? Right? Or is it just a simple truth? Like, if I derive inspiration, so one of my values is inspiration, I derive inspiration from the story of other people. Not just friends, not just families, not just companions, like all people. Everyone has a story. And I think it's one of the most beautiful things about being human. And to live with this sense of wonderment about the journey of every person, the challenges they've faced, the obstacles they overcome, and in the face of that, continue moving forward. Like, they're still here. They have this moment, the same moment that you and I have. So how we all live these just amazingly interesting lives to ultimately arrive at the same place with nothing but the past behind us. And the only thing we know to be true is this moment. Now, how do we show up? That is a truth, right? So when I speak to inspiration as a value, it's a truth. Whereas inner peace, okay, like if I'm looking for inner peace, being thankful for each day and the people that I get to connect with, if I can stop right there and not get emotionally hijacked into what's happening at work or this thing blowing up or be in 15 places, that's a harder thing for me to do. I value that, but that is aspirational for me. Like, that's not what I would say. It's not a consistent truth, because I lose sight of today, and I do lose sight of where I am, and I'm not grateful in a moment. I'm not honoring the gift. I get hijacked by life. But knowing that I don't value that, I do not value being hijacked, I want to approach the day differently, at least gives me some sort of orientation where I can step back from a situation and say, you know what's missing from this instance or this occurrence? Like, we're missing consideration for one another. We might be missing some element of grace, right? Something happened honestly that's creating a little bit of chaos. But having that orientation of inner peace, even though it's aspirational, it does sometimes trigger, in a given situation.
So let me just clarify
Yeah.
what the steps I hear is that the first part of clearing the noise is to make space, paired with having something to record your inner thoughts, or just some kind of journaling activity. Write it down. Then also I hear that the values can be a blend, and I'm intentionally stopping short of saying should be a blend
Right.
of
Can be.
held truths and aspirational states, maybe.
Right. That's the choice that I make, but like someone else should make their own choice. But it's this idea of, I really do find other people inspiring. Let me think about that and write about that for 5 or 10 minutes. And then let me take those words and condense them into a couple sentences. And let me continue to refine my thoughts about what inspires me. And that's the idea of creating the space and reflecting on, and this is Steve Laswell all day. Leaders create space. Leaders reflect on the truths of their story. What story have I written? Because what a great spot to look back in time and say, and where do I derive fulfillment? When am I fulfilled? What's that look like? And in my case, I look back, the truth of my story says, man, I'm fulfilled when I'm connecting with someone and hearing their story. I want to know how they did it. And it's just this, if I look back, that's what I feel. So maybe if we create that space, reflect the truth in our story, those moments and those situations and those conditions for fulfillment, I think, emerge. But we've got to be still enough and disciplined enough to think about them and give them their proper place versus what time do I got to get out of bed tomorrow? What do I got to do this weekend? Right? Oh, let me watch TV for a little bit. Right? We have to create space, reflect on the truth in the story, do the journaling exercise, crystallize our thoughts, and ultimately drive through. And I don't know if somebody should have 3 values or 7 values or 11, but I think when we reflect on our story, we certainly pick up on themes. It looks like I have 7, I don't know, maybe somebody else has 15. I just try to do what feels appropriate for me, going back to that idea of it's an inside job. It makes no difference what I do. I'm just sharing framework. What you do is the only thing that matters.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, and I appreciate you sharing. So the values take exploration, values take space, values take understanding of what really fulfills you. Right? I love that. What's most fulfilling to you? Right? I think everybody listening to this can think back on a time when they really felt fulfilled, and you can dig around in that. So big P purpose, little P purpose. We have our values. Chris, if you don't know this, first of all, I'm going to tell a little bit of a story because I know you like that.
Truthful story or
truthful story?
Okay,
truthful story. You were there for most of this, actually. But I think something that even the people in Sauntermore don't really realize is that Sauntermore itself, as a peer discussion group, is built on the back of I would say 18 months of working on my beliefs, purpose, and pursuits.
Right. Yeah.
Like a 3-part exercise worked over now. I think my existing And I'll be honest, there's probably some ones I didn't save in the interim, but I think officially I'm on round 18
Right. Yeah.
of trying to figure out what are those things that are fulfilling for this organization,
Mm-hmm.
specifically what we believe, what's our purpose, and how do we pursue those things.
Right.
So that was just that's just me expressing my gratitude to you introducing me to that framework, because I, for a long time, have been a big proponent of journaling and creating space.
Right.
But before we met, that became a part of my practice.
Right.
So why I'm sitting here today,
Yeah,
talking to you about this.
Yeah.
But also, I've learned over the course of my leadership journey that I really value roadmaps
Mm-hmm.
and plans, strategic plans.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm the guy in the organization who says, "Hey, wait, we're not looking back at the strategic plan that we made, 2 years ago. How does this gel with that and this?" So, what is there for a strategic plan, or what, or for how do we work that into our lives as a leader?
Right. So first I'll come back to the idea of a personal strategic plan. So I'm a marketer by practicing for the most part, but my formal education is in organizational design. And really what we found in organizational design is there were a lot of unlocks to be found from how we delivered individual behavior modification. And when we applied the practices of behavioral modification into organizations, how effective that was. And then like that idea of intentionally changing, which is it's exactly like a strategic plan. If I know where I'm at and I have this inspired vision of a better tomorrow, I know that I can learn and do things to make that true. Now that does require a growth mindset. But then if I continue to kind of monitor the impact of those new learnings and those new decisions, then I can make another set of measurements, monitor the impacts of the outcomes, understand my new current state. Where do I want it to go? What do I learn and do? I just keep turning that wheel. So there's always this unlock between things we know from personal psychology and things that we're now learning apply to organizations the same way. Organizations have a consciousness. Organizations have character. We've always known organizations have identity, right? That's the whole thing is brand. But as we start to explore these things, that's where we get into the exercises like you and I went through, right? We're really developing what is the character of this organization, Sauntermore, in explicit terms. Here's what we believe. Here's our big P purpose. Here's how we advance that purpose. And here's the impact we want to have on the world. I just want to do that same thing at an individual level. Here's my single-minded belief that love and connectedness create insane amounts of fulfillment, that my purpose is to connect and help other people move their stories forward. And ultimately, what's that impact? Well, hopefully I get to see other people achieve levels of success that like are unlocked for them, to see them achieve in ways that is exactly aligned with what they believe is fulfilling and brings me joy, right? So I can have the same architecture personally than what an organization or a company would have for a brand. If I'm not executing my life intentionally, then I will behave in unintentional ways. I know I will. I think most humans will, but I know I will. Okay. If I'm not doing things intentionally, I will behave in unintentional ways. So I need a plan. I need to know what are the things that, I would like, that I want to accomplish this year. I want to know how what I do today matters in advancing towards that goal. So I just think it's a level of discipline and orientation and intention that creates better outcomes for people. But I know what does for me, and I know what does for organizations. So that's really the gist. Like, people say, well, you really like, go about your life like it's a business. Like, I don't know how else to do it. Give me another way. I'm just trying to be intentional.
Which means writing it down.
Right? And so the words, or recording it, or whatever method we need to use to get it down, right? But it's about being explicit to the point, like, what do I have to do today? Thinking about, my values and how I'm inspired by other people's story. Well, that makes, like, I've got to be curious today. I got to learn from you. I've got to inform my perspective. So me being inspired, or having that value of inspiration, like, I have to act on my curiosity today. That value also fuels this need to, like, do something remarkable for someone else. Like, be inspired by their story enough to do something remarkable for them. Being bold, acknowledging difficult truths, investing in people, keeping commitment. Those are things that I know, if I can do these things today, I will continue to advance my purpose. So I kind of take this approach of purpose, values, just that core understanding. It's about grace and inner peace and spirituality and inspiration and learning and, being brave or courageous. Those are the things I value, but then they have to show up. And that's where, for me, commitment comes in. So today I'll act on my curiosity. Today I'll do something remarkable for someone else. Today I'm going to offer bold perspectives. Today I'm going to acknowledge a difficult truth from a place of love, care, and respect. Today I'm going to extend grace to anyone that I perceive harms me, right? Today I'm going to invest in people. Today I'm going to keep those appropriate commitments. And that's the whole thing. If today I can do this thing, then one day I'll have the benefit of many days well lived. And I think it helps to break it down. We only have to activate our values for one day. The only day that we know to be true. And I think it makes it more tolerable. Like, people look at this purpose thing as like something big and gnarly and hard to achieve. No, I just got to be curious. Do something remarkable for someone. Be bold. And, like, if I can just do those things today, I'm moving towards what I'm trying to achieve.
I love that. So we're going to wrap up. Thank you very much for this, Chris. And I think for the people in the room or that are watching here in the Sauntermore group, we are about to do a values workbook exercise. Chris, do you want to explain to them a little bit more about what they're about to dive into?
Yeah, I think, for today, I'd love to just spend a little bit of time thinking about roles. Like, go ahead, like, take inventory of the roles that you're responsible for. And I think we'll be really surprised about how many roles we're accountable to. And, spend a moment just reflecting on, how do you show up in those roles? How would you like to show up in those roles? Current state, inspired future state. Thinking through that, I think that orients us in a unique way to ground ourselves in the roles that we're accountable to. But then let's spend some time reflecting on the truths in our story. Moments in time where we know we were fulfilled. Moments in time where we were ecstatic. Moments in time when we know beyond a shadow of a doubt we were at our best. And what was it about those moments that we were valuing? So I want to look back and as we reflect on the story, we have the space to do it today. think about those keystone moments. When did I feel fulfilled? When was I at my best? When was I just over the moon? And there are certain things we were valuing in those moments that you still value today. Why? Because those are the moments you think about. Right? So let's go through that process and let's write down like what we were valuing in those moments. And let's see if we can pull out some key themes. What things emerge? It's like, what's common across these moments that we've all experienced? Maybe it was yesterday. Maybe it was 5 years ago. Maybe it's in this moment. There's something that you're valuing. Let's get those down and let's pull those key themes, because those key themes are your values. And then spend some time writing about that idea. You know, if it's about learning, write about that idea. If it's about being courageous, write about that idea. Right? And ultimately, try to crystallize in 2 to 3 sentences why that's your value. And then, like, as we go forward, let's put those values into commitments. That today I will. Because I believe this, I'm going to do this. Right? And then we start getting really resilient. Yeah, and you read Thick Face, Black Heart.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, what I'm trying to make happen in my life, I own. I don't care what anybody else thinks about it. You know, and you kind of share your thoughts on Thick Face, Black Heart.
For me, Thick Face, Black Heart is kind of a representation of how I identify as like an embodied sense of liberation. And that's just to say that is that when you have when you are showing up at a premium, when you feel that you have your compass cleared, that there's nothing that comes into your path that isn't somehow fueling you. It's either fueling you towards your purpose, or at the very least is not distracting you from taking the next steps.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a gross oversimplification of Thick Face, Black Heart. But, to go back on, the experience of reading it, and kind of what I took away from it is it was permission to unapologetically move forward.
That's it. Yeah. Unapologetically.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have to apologize for what we believe. We don't. We only have this minute. There's no reason to be an apologist for doing or acting in a way that influences the world in a way that's aligned with our purpose. Like, what are we trying to achieve? Being explicit about that, being unapologetic about it, makes it more likely that we will achieve it. If we have to be apologist for what we believe, that in and of itself is a constraint. So I want to wish all of our community at Sauntermore, like, hopefully you enjoy the practice. And I think it's rich. I think everybody will, enjoy a high return on the time. There's some slugging through the muck, because we've all got the ugly stuff back there too. So let's, it's okay for that to lie low, right? When we're doing this kind of work. Those hard times very much have informed our values today, but focus on those keystone moments and let's see what we can extract and see how we can move forward tomorrow with maybe a more informed understanding, or maybe we're more explicit about how we go about our day. But all this is really just to create proper orientation and invite these things into our life, invite more of them into our life explicitly. And I can promise you, when this work is done, that's exactly what happens.
Amen, brother.
Well, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. So Dillon, I appreciate you. I appreciate everything that you do with Sauntermore. Obviously, I believe wholeheartedly in what you're building, and any way that I can help, I'm always here for that. So thank you for joining, or kind of coming in and doing this with me today. And, I hope that it's something that some of our listeners enjoy, take away from, and apply it in their own lives, however they see fit. But I'll just kind of read us out and say you can find our downloadable guides for even values and purpose. You can find all this on magicintheroom.com. You can find Purpose and Performance Group on all your social channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. So make sure we connect that way. And today's episode was recorded live in Tulsa, Oklahoma at Storycatcher Studios. Our Magic in the Room is hosted by Luke Freeman, Hannah Broderud, and Chris Province, and produced by Ben West. The music for Magic in the Room is produced by Evan Grimm, and you can find his music on iTunes and Spotify. So thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you next time here on Magic in the Room.